If it's Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sign a new pact, tightening the ties between two of America's top adversaries, as the White House faces a deepening divide with Israel and the threat of a widening war in the Middle East. Plus, it's too close to call in a bitter primary battle in Virginia, and the margin keeps getting tighter as the candidate backed by former President Trump and former Speaker McCarthy tries to oust the powerful chair of the House Freedom Caucus. And tens of millions of Americans are facing excessive heat warnings and bracing for days of scorching temperatures as the season's first official tropical storm is churning in the Gulf of Mexico, threatening Texas with heavy rainfall and dangerous flooding. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in New York, wishing everyone a happy Juneteenth. On just the fourth time ever, we're celebrating this day as a federal holiday. The National Museum of African American History and Culture reminds us that the historical legacy of Juneteenth shows the value of never giving up hope in uncertain times. We'll have much more later this hour on the significance of the holiday and the celebration of freedom that it commemorates. But we begin with escalating challenges abroad, as President Biden grapples with growing rifts in our alliances, while our adversaries appear to be in lockstep. The Biden administration has described America's commitment to Israel as ironclad, but there are new cracks in that alliance. Once again today, with the White House denying reports it canceled a high-level meeting with Israeli officials. A White House official tells me that the meeting in question was never finalized, and so nothing was canceled. According to a report in Axios, President Biden's top advisors were, quote, enraged after Prime Minister Netanyahu released a video statement yesterday accusing the administration of withholding weapons and ammunition. The administration quickly pushed back.
We generally do not know what he's talking about. We just don't. We were very clear about there being one shipment that we're continue to have construction conversations with Israel about. Nothing else has been paused.
There's been no change in our posture, which our posture is, again, to make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself across these many threats.
It comes as the concerns of a wider war in the Mideast continue to escalate. Prime Minister Netanyahu warning his government today that Israel is already at war on several fronts, and the IDF says it has approved operational plans for a potential offensive into Lebanon. And the leader of Hezbollah is issuing new threats of his own today, saying Hezbollah will fight with, quote, no rules should the clashes escalate into a broader war. The concerns of escalating conflicts and the burgeoning threat from our adversaries was also on full display in North Korea today, where Kim Jong-un rolled out a literal red carpet for Russia's President Putin in Pyongyang. The two leaders signed a new pact, vowing to come to each other's defense if either country were attacked. Putin touted the agreement, calling it a breakthrough document. U.S. officials are increasingly concerned about the deepening relations between the two countries and what it could mean for Ukraine, as North Korea continues to provide weapons and munitions to Russia as their stockpiles dwindle. For more on those meetings in North Korea today, NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer filed this report.
Russian President Vladimir Putin got a warm red carpet welcome from Kim Jong-un. There was even a moment of awkward debate over who would be first to get into Kim's luxury car, which incidentally was a gift from Putin. Throughout the state visit, the two remained side by side, projecting unity as they walked past soldiers, horses, groups of children. After 2 hours of talks, they signed a strategic defense treaty that provides mutual assistance in case of aggression against either of the two countries. Putin said the agreement lifts their ties to a new level as they're both looking to strengthen their partnership in the face of sanctions from the West. Kim pronounced North Korea's unwavering support for Russia in the war with Ukraine, and Putin thanked him for that. The question is, what comes next? North Korea has been accused of providing Russia with ammunition and missiles, and the worry is that more deliveries will follow this visit. Moscow, in return, can provide food, energy, and other aid, as well as the sort of technology that could help North Korea boost its missile and nuclear programs. All of this is raising alarms for the U.S. and the West, because this strengthened alliance is not only fueling the war in Ukraine, but instability on the Korean Peninsula. The State Department has already said that North Korea has shipped 11,000 containers of munitions in recent months to aid Russia's war effort. And this visit and all its fanfare will do little to ease those concerns.
That was Janice Mackey-Fair in Beijing. And I'm joined now by NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley in Jerusalem. Thank you both so much for joining me. Monica, let's start in North Korea. How is the administration reacting to this new defense pact?
Well, Gabe, they say that they have really been warning about this deepening cooperation between North Korea and Russia for some time. So they're really casting this as not surprising, but all the while concerning. And they're really saying and emphasizing that, of course, the U.S. will continue to support Ukraine and allies in the Indo-Pacific in the face of this. And they really are saying that it shouldn't necessarily be underestimated, that this is something, of course, that people should take seriously, but it's something that the White House has really been keeping an eye on. And they always like to really put this in the larger concept and context of look at who President Putin's allies are, look at who Kim Jong-un's allies are, and then look at the rest of the world and view this as they are isolated in what they can do together versus the way larger international community putting pressure on Russia to end its war in Ukraine. Gabe.
Yeah, Monica, picking up on that point, the U.S. already has a slew of sanctions on Russia and North Korea. As you said, both countries increasingly isolated on the world stage. So is there anything the administration can really do to try and stop this partnership from growing?
And we've seen in the past that sanctions also may not always be as effective as they are in their messaging for what the U.S. and the Biden administration would like to convey. But nonetheless, the administration will continue to evaluate and says that they could be coming down with further sanctions, and they're always looking to those things. But this is really about just trying to present these very, very differing worldviews and also trying to raise this larger question and idea that they say that President Biden, during his term in office so far, has tried to restore some stability to the world stage. And they always put this in the context of what could happen if he loses re-election and if former President Trump, who has had at times sympathetic words for both President Putin and for Kim Jong-un at times, what that could mean for that. And they like to, they say, remind Americans of the stakes of that. So they bring that back into the fold as well. But that will simply be determined by the voters in November, Gabe.
Yeah, and Monica, let's turn to Israel, where once again we're seeing this rift, right, between the White House and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It looks like the White House, at least publicly, it says it was caught off guard by this video statement from the Prime Minister yesterday. What do we know about this meeting that was reportedly canceled?
Yeah, and it's rare to have the White House say literally, bottom line, we have no idea what the Prime Minister of Israel is talking about and saying that there was no such meeting scheduled. There are normal communications and conversations between Israeli and U.S. officials throughout the course of this week and almost every single week, obviously, since the war began and since October 7th. So the White House is saying that there are always these sort of back-channel communications. That shouldn't be surprising, but it's not like there was some major meeting that now needs to be rescheduled. And the fact that really you had Secretary Blinken very clear in his messaging when he came back from that recent trip, putting this in the context of saying, yes, there was one shipment of weapons that was put on hold when President Biden had talked about this larger potential shift in policy and threats to withhold military aid, but that there hadn't been anything since then. The U.S. has been very clear on that, saying that they don't know what Prime Minister Netanyahu is referring to when he's trying to imply in those comments that there were more, that there has been other halting of shipments or aid or weapons that Israel is asking for. It really just speaks to how fraught this relationship is at a really critical point in the war, where we just don't know also what the true status is of the hostage talks and potential ceasefire deal. Gabe.
And Matt, I want to turn to you on the ground in Jerusalem. What are Israeli officials saying about these tensions between the two leaders? Now that the war cabinet has been dissolved, with moderates like Benny Gantz no longer advising the prime minister, could we see even more tension between President Biden and the prime minister?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the tensions and the fraught relationship that my colleague Monica was just saying, that's been going on for months. And actually, we rarely see these really obvious sightings of it. Things like the broadside that was fired by Benjamin Netanyahu in that video and that response by the White House saying they had no idea what he was talking about. These are the kinds of words you don't hear between close allies. And what we're seeing now is sort of a relationship that is under a lot of strain, a lot of stress. But so is Benjamin Netanyahu. He's facing his own pressures from within his own camp. He has one of the most right-wing governments in Israel's history. He has to answer now, as you mentioned, mostly to his right flank. Now that Benny Gantz, considered a moderate, has resigned from the war cabinet and pulled out of the government, or his party has, that means that it's kind of the right wing that's left to their own devices. And these people are quite aggressive when it comes to the fighting in the Gaza Strip. They are hawks in the truest sense of the word. And so, that might cause more tension with Washington. Benjamin Netanyahu has to parry from both sides in his, dealings with all of these different factions within the government. But now he doesn't have to do that as much. He's going to be dragged even further to the right. And that could be a problem, particularly when it comes to these negotiations, that the U.S. government, particularly Secretary of State Antony Blinken, has made a pet project. He's been to the region 8 times trying to negotiate this. So, this is going to be complicated and further politically ostracizing for both Washington and for Netanyahu and his right-wing ministers.
And Matt, the UN is out with another report today saying that Israel may have violated the laws of war in Gaza. What else is in that report, and what's the latest on the ground in the Gaza Strip?
Well, what we're seeing in the Gaza Strip is still this continuing fighting, particularly in the southern part in Rafah. We were seeing some strikes against the Nusayrat refugee camp, which have been going on actually for the past couple of weeks. We had that huge operation that killed more than 270 Palestinians, according to the Gazan health authorities, when they were trying to free and successfully freed those 4 Israeli hostages. Now, there has been a lot of these sorts of accusations by the United Nations and other international groups accusing both Israel and Hamas of having committed war crimes. And one of the big issues we keep hearing over and over again is one of proportionality. And, that episode in freeing those 4 hostages, that is something that really speaks to that proportionality issue. But also, we've heard from Israeli government officials saying how distasteful it is not just to have these accusations levied against them, but in so many cases to be lumped with Hamas. They don't want to be they don't want to have a moral equivalency with Hamas, and that's what we keep seeing from the ICJ and the ICC, these sorts of rulings where we're starting to see a lot of sort of, moral equivalency, and that's very angering to a lot of Israeli officials.
Matt Bradley, live for us in Jerusalem. Monica Alba outside the White House. Thank you both so much. And coming up, the first tropical storm of the season, bringing heavy rains and flooding to parts of Mexico and Texas as it heads towards landfall. Plus, a new push for the federal government to change disaster declarations to include heat. And take a look, spirits and temperatures running high in Milwaukee today for the city's Juneteenth parade and celebration. We'll have more on the history and significance of the holiday straight ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We're following breaking news. The first tropical storm of the season has formed in the Gulf of Mexico. Tropical storm Alberto formed this morning over the western Gulf. The National Hurricane Center says the storm could bring heavy rains and flooding to parts of Texas and northeastern Mexico through tomorrow. This is the scene in Galveston, Texas, which is already dealing with some of the effects of Alberto. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has already ordered the state's Division of Emergency Management to begin 24-hour operations. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has predicted what it calls an extraordinary hurricane season, with as many as, get this, 25 named storms. NBC's Guad Venegas joins me now, live from Corpus Christi, Texas. And Guad, what are you seeing out there?
Gabe, we've had the rain come and go, heavy rain that started at about noon. We've seen the water level rise here in the Corpus Christi Bay. Now, this is the most protected part of the city. You can see the seawall here that protects the downtown area. But the marina to my right has roadways that connect downtown to the marina. Those roadways, I mean, you can't even see it behind me, but behind those boats, there is a street, and that's been closed down for a few hours. Of course, vehicles can no longer go over to the other side. There's also some flooding on the north end and the North Beach area of Corpus Christi. And of course, there's that flood watch in effect for the entire area. Again, the heavy rain will hit for about half an hour, and then it'll come back 20 minutes later. It's coming in waves, as we know that the storm is in this direction down east of Mexico. So for now, authorities here are vigilant. They've shut down a lot of the streets, asking people to stay away from those flooded areas, especially in their vehicles, because of the danger of driving through those areas. You never know how deep it can be. Even walking around some of these areas, I'm on the steps in the seawall here, but there's more steps. You know, you take one step and it just gets really deep, and it's the same on streets. So it's difficult to tell how deep areas are as this storm comes through. Now, you mentioned the resources that have been set aside by the governor, the Texas Division of Emergency Management. They have about 20 agencies that are ready to help the cities and the counties, including the National Guard, depending on what happens in the next few hours and overnight when the storm comes through here, Gabe.
Guad Venegas live for us in Corpus Christi, Texas. Guad, thank you. Now, tens of millions of Americans are also dealing with dangerous and potentially deadly heat. More than 70 million people are under some form of heat advisory or warning today, and about half of the country is experiencing temperatures in the 90s. Ahead of the official start of summer tomorrow, dozens of environmental and healthcare groups are urging FEMA to recognize extreme heat and wildfire smoke as major disasters. That designation would allow FEMA to provide additional funding to communities to help cope with the effects. I'm joined now by Jean Su. She's a senior attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity and lead author of that petition to FEMA to recognize heat as a major disaster. Thank you so much for joining us. So how would the funding for heat-related emergencies even be allocated?
Yeah, so funding for heat it has to be allocated according to states that actually ask for the disaster declarations. And what we actually saw in the COVID context is that Presidents Biden and Trump actually declared emergencies for COVID and then invited all states to apply for COVID funding. And that's exactly what we're trying to ask for with these extreme heat issues as well. As you've already said, it's 82% of the U.S. population right now is experiencing a surge of over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are just at the beginning of the summer. So I think many states will be in a position to ask for that extreme heat and have that financial help accordingly.
So, Jean, who would determine what constitutes a heat-related emergency? Because as you know, 100-degree temperatures in, say, New York City is a lot different than 100 degrees in Phoenix.
Absolutely. So FEMA currently defines extreme heat as 90 degrees under the heat index. And so what that is as a heat index is a mixture of both temperature as well as humidity. So that's one of the first thresholds to cross. But on top of that, you have to look at what communities are now and how they can cope with it. So there are communities, particularly in the Northeast right now, who are not accustomed to this heat and who have no air conditioning whatsoever. They're going to be different from another state that has had heat for a little bit longer and that have those cooling needs. So every single jurisdiction has to be evaluated in terms of what needs they have from the federal government, what needs that their state can actually supply, and what more they need from the federal government for help.
So, Jean, the wheels of government don't always turn so quickly. Has FEMA indicated whether it's receptive to your petition?
So FEMA has indicated that they are open to our legal interpretation, which is that the Stafford Act, which is the animating statute of FEMA, doesn't prevent extreme heat major disaster declarations from happening. Having said that, though, we're in a second year of record-breaking heat. And last year, there was also a huge push from Congress folks and in different states who have all asked FEMA for this type of help. So we've made this new effort again to hopefully hopefully get emergency help this season right now, and hopefully start erecting the type of cooling centers, air filtration systems, rooftop and community solar that will allow electricity to keep running during rolling blackouts due to grid infrastructure breaking down for extreme heat. These are the types of infrastructure that will actually save lives, and if built now, can give us many, many years of return.
And Jean, is your petition a sort of concession that it's time to focus more on mitigating the effects of climate change and less on actually combating climate change?
So it is both. Actually, mitigation, one of the main aspects of that is getting rooftop and community solar and storage on homes and on low-income buildings and public buildings as well. That is for two reasons. One is because it's actually resilient. As I said before, our grid is breaking down due to extreme heat right now, leading to tons of rolling blackouts and utility shutoffs. So that type of electricity keeps the lights on, the electricity on for cooling and air filtration systems. And at the same time, it's combating climate change because we're switching off of fossil fuel sources to renewable energy. So those are all part of the puzzle of our necessary energy transition. We have to get off of fossil fuels. That's still the number one point of intervention to stop the climate change from raging even more. But for the meantime, as we adapt to it, we actually need those clean energy sources as well to keep people alive.
And Jean, obviously it's easy to talk about this now when so many people around the country are facing heat alerts, but do you worry that the urgency of this petition will dissipate when fall and winter come?
That is always a political issue and a concern. But I think, what we're trying to make the point of is you can't just allow these huge seasons of death and unprecedented death to run their course and not do anything about it. FEMA actually has a saying that every dollar for mitigation gives you $6 in return if you're going to put it into money terms. And what we're saying right now is we need to address this now. People are dying at an unprecedented rate now. So we're hoping that this type of pressure can actually lead to actual change now for infrastructure that can really last several years and save lives.
Jean Su, the lead author of that petition, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
Up next, it's not looking good for Bob Good. The Republican incumbent congressman is locked in a dead heat with his Trump-backed primary challenger with a current margin of just over 300 votes. We'll have the latest on that nail-biter and the potential political fallout next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back. If it's Wednesday, voters voted somewhere yesterday, which means today we have some results, and one key race is still too close to call. In Oklahoma, the Republican chair of the powerful House Appropriations Committee, Tom Cole, fended off a self-funded challenger, the Associated Press projects. And in Virginia, NBC News projects Eugene Vindman, a key figure in Donald Trump's first impeachment, as the winner of the Democratic primary for the seat vacated by Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who's running for governor next year. But last night's most closely watched race was in Virginia's 5th District, where incumbent Republican Bob Good faced a challenge from Trump-backed State Senator John McGuire. And as at this hour, NBC News has still not projected a winner in that close primary, where the latest numbers show McGuire and Good less than a percentage point apart. Joining me now live is NBC's Ali Vitale, who's been following this race closely for us. And Ali, we knew this race was going to be interesting, given both Donald Trump and former Speaker McCarthy's involvement. But were we expecting it to be so close?
Definitely not. And in my conversations, Gabe, with sources before I went to the district last weekend and then since, this is really a surprise. They expected to see, at least in the loose polling that we saw, the polling that was being done by the campaigns, the expectation was that McGuire would win and would do so early in the night and by a pretty sizable margin. Instead, you're looking at it there right on the screen, a 313 vote difference. It's only changed by a few dozen votes, narrowing the margin over the course of the day. day. And even last night, as I was sitting at home and watching these results come in, like I'm sure all the other cool kids watching this program, just watching this margin continue to stay so tight and so close, it really was a surprise. Again, you're right. Even though we knew it was going to be interesting, this vote margin tells a different story, I think, than the one that we thought we were going to be talking about today, which is McGuire specifically getting Trump's endorsement. It should have been that swayed a large swath of conservative voters in this ruby red district. That's the way that Trump likes to see his endorsement play out. Instead, we're basically watching a Trump endorsement put him in a statistical tie and a race that's not yet been called.
Well, Allie, you're definitely a cool kid to me. So if it remains this close, if it's still this close, do we expect the losing candidate to just request a recount?
Probably, especially because the rules here are not that it goes automatically to a recount, but if it's within 1 percentage point, they can request a recount. And that's one of the things that we're watching here. Bob Good, for his part, even though he's only trailing by 300 votes, is effectively saying, let's have patience. We're waiting for mail-in ballots to be counted. Let's see if we can still have a chance here. McGuire, though, last night at his election night party, all but declared victory. Again, that's not what our results have. This is still a race that's too close to be called. But it's interesting to see that, you know, in an instance where both of these folks have denied the results of the past elections, in this one they're saying, all right, let's cool our jets, let's count all the votes.
And, Allie, this is getting a lot of national attention, obviously, because the question is, what does this say about Trump's influence? You've been down there in Virginia. Is there a chance that his endorsement is what, at least at the moment, pulled McGuire over the edge?
It could be. McGuire thinks that he was meeting people who said, well, I don't know who you are, but if Trump likes you, I will vote for you. That might have been what put McGuire within striking distance here. But then you talk to Bob Good, and he thinks that the local vibe on the ground, his stance and his position as an incumbent is enough to put him over the edge. I think that what we're seeing here is that it is really hard to knock off an incumbent. That's always been the reality, and you hear it from challengers all the time. But typically when a challenger has Trump's backing, it makes a huge difference. Here, it's really interesting to see the fact that it might not have.
Cool kid, Allie Vitale. Thank you so much for joining us.
Please put that on my Chiron going forward.
I will. Put that on your business card. Thank you, Allie. I really appreciate having you on. And joining me now is our panel. Former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and Susan DePercio, Republican strategist and an NBC News political analyst. Thank you both so much for joining me here in New York. And Susan, I want to start with you. Should we view the closeness of this race? What does it say? As I was talking about with Allie, is this really about the power of a Trump endorsement, or is just Virginia just very hard to predict? What do you make of it?
I do think it's only as close as it is because of Donald Trump's endorsement. I am willing to guess that Donald Trump saw the same polling that Allie heard about a few weeks ago that showed that McGuire was ahead, because Trump, that's usually how he makes his endorsements on races he knows nothing about or candidates he does not know. He wants to make sure no matter what, he's with the winner. So my guess is, saw the polling, said, all right, and I don't like that. Good. He voted, you know, he wanted Ron DeSantis. He went to Ron over me.
Pettiness.
Pettiness, that
Donald
no
Trump?
good, vengeance comes to mind. I will say that Good is the only person I know at this point that can unite Kevin McCarthy and Donald Trump. They both endorse his opponent. But it is close, but never underestimate the power of incumbency.
Well, Jay, if this is a test of Trump's influence, is a close race good or bad for him?
Well, first of all, I think Susan is absolutely right. He does pick his fights. He's not going to jump in for a long shot. Well, first of all, she's right. I mean, Good made two powerful enemies by supporting DeSantis and by going against Kevin McCarthy. What I find very strange about this, normally the Republican in a primary is concerned about a challenge from their right, and a Democrat in a primary is concerned about a challenge from their left. Good is chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and he's facing a challenge. The fact that it's as close as it is, given his position in the House, really does say something probably about his weakness as a candidate.
Right. I was just going to say, and it's not about having a choice between a moderate Republican, let's say. That's what we usually hear in Republican primaries. These are two extremists, as extreme as they get.
But so then does this race, is it informative about the direction of the Republican Party as a whole? Or is it just, one wing of the Republican Party? What do you think?
Well, I mean, you can't chart the Republican Party by ideology anymore. It's all, Trump and those few left who are less than enthusiastic about Trump. And so, as long as Trump's a force, he dominates that party. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. But I think it shows an electorate that's willing to forego tradition, if you will, like looking for someone, oh, he's been my Congress member, he has sway in D.C., versus, like, they just want to go with, in Republican politics, whoever Trump says.
That's actually a very good point. Tom Cole, who's, I think, about to become chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. That is one of the most powerful positions in the House of Representatives. Barely beat off an attack. If you're a constituent of Tom Cole's, you want to be a constituent of the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. So, it's hard to explain.
Jay, I want to get your opinion, your analysis on some new NBC News reporting. The election denialism of the last cycle was in part driven by misinformation and disinformation. Well, that new NBC News reporting shows that the Biden administration has no firm plans to alert the public about deepfakes or other false information during the election unless it is clearly from foreign actors. Is that a mistake? It's tough, obviously.
Whether it's foreign actors or domestic actors, we need to call out deepfakes, generative AI that is false in its depiction of candidates and what they say. We cannot limit ourselves to just foreign actors. A government does have to be careful about trying to regulate speech, trying to deem something to be fake news. When I was in office, I'd always think about how an authority might be misused by a different administration. And so there's a line to be drawn between trying to prohibit it or branding it as fake news versus informing the public, hey, this is deceptive. This is a deep fake. This is a cheap fake. Or it's AI at work.
Well, you just mentioned several things: deep fake, cheap fake, disinformation. Susan, who decides? In some cases, it's really obvious, right? But in other cases, who decides what is true? And if the government wades into politics here, I believe there's someone quoted in the article saying that it's difficult sometimes for the FBI to make that determination. How do we make that distinction?
Yeah, and it is difficult because now we have social media, right? Like, so it used to be if there was a deep fake that could be proven, then the FEC would go over and attack the NBC or whatever network was putting it on, Fox or whoever, and they would have to be pulled from the airwaves or face consequences. That doesn't exist anymore. So with social media. So I think they'll have to find some type of intent other than like one political party going in after another if it's the FBI investigating versus some bad actors who are just trying to turn the election upside down. But it's really hard to tell because a cheap fake, which we saw all over the airwaves in last week, is a really
fake. A cheap fake is not false. A cheap fake is manipulating
misleading,
a legitimate film of something, or another form of cheap fake, I suppose, is I always knew whether a story about me when I was in government was going to be bad or good based simply on the photograph they use.
Yeah, okay. That's right.
It's okay, this is going to be a bad story, and so
not just the headline, the
using the film of Biden at the D-Day event and making it look like he's lost. That was a legitimate. Yeah. It was a real film. It's a real video. Yeah. I think it's up to the political arena to call that kind of thing out.
Well, before I let you two go, Jay, I'm glad you're here because I wanted to talk about the executive action that President Biden announced yesterday at the border. This comes 2 weeks after he tightened asylum rules, and then yesterday he announced that 500,000 undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens could be shielded from deportation thanks to this executive action. As a former DHS secretary, what's your reaction to that?
I think it's worthwhile doing. It's going to be challenged in the courts, and the outcome all depends on forum shopping. Pro-enforcement lawsuits are brought in the Brownsville division of the Southern District of Texas, and pro-migrant pro-humanitarian lawsuits are brought in San Francisco or federal court in Brooklyn. And so it's going to depend on the where this is brought and how it works its way up through the courts. As a policy matter, I think it is a good idea to protect the spouses of U.S. citizens who've been in this country 10 years, haven't committed any crimes. It's a mixed family arrangement. Very often the children are U.S. citizens, so from a policy perspective, it makes sense. It emulates DACA, right, which was something we created in 2012, and it emulates DAPA, which is something I created in 2014, which was challenged in the courts, and we lost in the Supreme Court by a tie, 4-4, because there was a vacancy at the moment.
But can you appreciate how difficult the politics of this has become? Because it also, executive action could be undone after the November election. Correct. Besides of, what happens in the courts, right, Susan?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why governance by executive order is the worst form of governance. But it's the only thing you can do when you have a divided house. I will say this: I think the Biden rollout of their immigration policy has been horrible. I mean, it's just been scattershot. They should have come out bold, State of the Union. Put it all out there, be strong about it. But now it looks like they're responding to every constituency, and that it's not really formulated.
Susan DePersia, thank you so much. Jay Johnson, really appreciate you joining me here in New York. And after the break, the joy of Juneteenth. We'll dig into the history of the holiday and the continued fight for freedom and equality. Here's a moment from the Vice President's remarks, speaking on the importance of Juneteenth at the White House's celebration.
As we celebrate Juneteenth, together we are reminded of the promise of America, a promise of freedom, liberty, and opportunity, not for some, but for all. In many ways, the story of Juneteenth and of our nation is a story of our ongoing fight to realize that promise.
Welcome back. Today is Juneteenth, the holiday marking the day enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, learned they'd been freed after the end of the Civil War and more than 2 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. 2024 marks Juneteenth's 4th year as a federal holiday, and as many celebrate with parades and gatherings, NBC's Zincle Asamoah has more on how it became recognized nationally and the remarkable woman who helped make it happen.
These walls in Fort Worth, Texas may look like a Black History museum, but it's actually the home of Opal Lee.
And Miss Opal Lee, you are 97 years old, right? Many consider you the grandmother of Juneteenth. How does that title sit with you?
Hey, I don't mind titles.
For years, Lee advocated for Juneteenth to become a federal holiday, inspired by her own family's celebrations.
We'd go to the fairground for the Juneteenth celebration. There'd be music and food.
But one year, when Lee was 12, the annual celebration turned to terror.
My parents had just bought a house and my mom had it fixed up so nice. But people started gathering.
What kind of people?
All kinds.
It was a white mob.
The paper says it was 500 of them. And my dad came home with a gun and the police were there and told my dad, if you bust a cap, we'll let this mob have you. They did despicable things.
The terror did not quelch her resolve. In 2016, Lee made headlines at 89 years old, pledging to walk from Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. The journey, 2.5 miles each day, to symbolize the 2.5 years Black Texans waited for the message of emancipation to reach them.
That if a little old lady in tennis shoes was walking from Fort Worth to D.C. 1,400 miles, somebody would take notice.
And they did. In 2021, the White House calling Lee, President Joe Biden making Juneteenth a federal holiday.
How did you feel?
No, I don't know how to express it. I was awed. I was thankful.
In May, Lee was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
I'm struck by how much history lives on your walls, but also in your stories. What do you ultimately want your legacy to be?
That there was an old lady who tried to get it over to everybody that we are one people.
What a remarkable woman, and we thank Zincle Asamoah for that report. And joining me now is Keith Mays, professor of Black Studies at the University of California at Santa Barbara. He's also the author of The Unteachables, Disability Rights and the Invention of Black Special Education. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. And listening to you bet. Listening to Zincle's reporting there, what do you make of the reminder of just how recent this history is, beyond the fact that federal recognition didn't come until 2021?
Absolutely. I think when you look at the totality of the history of Juneteenth, you can't help but to recognize Opal Lee and all the other Black grassroots activists that kept the holiday alive at the community level, Gabe. That's important because in many ways, the recognition of all Black celebrations, they live with the participation of community folks who give life to the holidays every year. And then we see the recognition by either city councils, counties, states who begin to embrace the holiday after Black communities across the countries have kept it alive. So I think it's a wonderful thing. I think I think Texas was the first state to recognize it in 1980. Many of the state recognitions across the country, Gabe, really only began in the 21st century. And that led up to the federal recognition and the signing of the Juneteenth into law by President Biden in 2021. So it's been a long history, a long legislative history.
Yeah, and so, Professor, many people have today off, of course, being a federal holiday now, and as they plan to celebrate, is there an appropriate way to celebrate? So do you see this more of a somber day of commemoration or a day of celebration?
It's both. It's a day of celebration. It's a day of memory, public memory, historical memory, understanding the significance of the holiday, putting the holiday into its appropriate historical context. And as your leading piece demonstrated, it is about the formal ending of slavery. But we also have to understand that Juneteenth should talk about the material realities that African Americans face. So on the one hand, it's great to celebrate the history of Black America, but we also have to at least begin to think about how these commemorations, these perennial celebrations can address some of the long-standing issues that face Black folks in this country.
And Professor, to that point, we are, of course, in an election year. What do you see as the importance of this holiday in this current political moment, particularly given the deep partisan divisions we've seen?
That's a really good question, because, again, Juneteenth is part of American history. It is central to Black American history. And so the battles that we are engaged in around Black history, in the teaching of it in classrooms, it is really important for us to understand that Juneteenth is appropriate to understand, to embrace, to celebrate, and to teach our children and the children of this country who Black America is and was and should be going forward in the future. It will become part of the electoral process in terms of the partisan nature of our politics today, but we have to insist on Juneteenth and other Black celebrations being embraced and being part of the larger American conversation. Not only Black America and its political future, but also about who we are as a country and as American citizens. We must embrace Juneteenth.
And Professor, I want to play some of what Vice President Harris said at a Juneteenth celebration in Georgia yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Now that it is a federal holiday, let's also incorporate into our tradition, our new traditions, that we will think of Juneteenth of a day for us to have a call to action to register folks to vote. So let's think about Juneteenth as a way that reaffirms our commitment to holding on to our freedoms and rights, especially in this environment where there is a full-on attempt to attack fundamental freedoms and rights.
And Professor, before I let you go, what kind of action do you want to see from politicians and lawmakers?
I want to see the action that began after the tragic death of George Floyd. In many ways, Juneteenth is an unfinished revolution, because one can argue that if it wasn't for the murder of George Floyd, we may not have had a federal holiday that was signed by President Biden in 2021. But also, we have other unresolved legislative battles to face. Voting rights is one, police accountability is another. I would like to see these holidays galvanize us to action and pass some of the most important pieces of legislation that we have to pass in order for us to be the country that we've always been. We're talking about rollbacks politically, and if Juneteenth and any other Black holiday can address these issues, can forestall the regression of civil rights gains, then it's worth celebrating, embracing, and fighting for. This is the year to do it in 2024.
Professor Keith Mayes, thank you so much for this important conversation on this day.
Thank you.
And still to come, new reporting on how parents and teens are reacting to the Surgeon General's push to slap warning labels onto social media platforms as families face mounting challenges online. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The Surgeon General's call this week for tobacco-style warning labels on social media platforms has led some parents and teens to have serious conversations about the effects and dangers of social media on young people. My colleague, Yasmin Vasugian, met with a group of parents and teens to talk about the issue. Here's part of their conversation.
Do you feel like it would be helpful if there was this kind of Surgeon General warning, as you see, for instance, on a box of cigarettes? Warning on the effects of the overuse, for instance, of social media?
This is a great opportunity to look at strong suggestions, the advice of our nation's top doctor to include a label and really to enhance, to lift this up for federal legislation.
I definitely think it would. I think having these warning signs, more than being for the kids, honestly, I think they're for the parents. And they enable the parents to say, look, even the top physician in the land says this is dangerous. Like, I am going to say no, and here, this is a reason, this is a justification for it that's something that you can understand.
I think the sooner we can get the warnings out, the better for everybody.
Miles, do you think it would affect your behavior on social media?
It depends what it says. It would make me think more about what I'm doing, which could lead me to taking different actions. But I don't think directly I'd see that and I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna watch this because I saw that. But it would probably make me watch for shorter. It would make me think more about what I'm doing and being aware about what's happening.
I don't think that it would stop me from going into the social media app, but I do think that it would make me think twice about what the effects are. Maybe even courses in school could be more helpful, because I think that educating people on what those effects are would be very impactful, rather than just knowing there are effects.
I do think that the label should be implemented. I don't think it should be in fine print, because nobody reads fine print. But yeah, I think it would be...
So big across the screen.
Yes, as big as you can get.
It's an honest conversation. Nobody reads a fine print. And
yeah, exactly.
Yasmin joins me
Especially
now.
Kids.
Thanks so much for bringing us this important conversation. Do you think parents and kids are having this conversation independent of the Surgeon General's op-ed, or did that op-ed kind of, turbocharge that conversation?
I think they've been having the conversation, and I found that to be really interesting in the conversation I had with these three mothers and their children, because they had been talking about the use of personal devices and social media in the lead up to allowing them access to social media. They talked about the pitfalls, the dangers of social media, right? Things to do, things not to do, what they'll be seeing online, what they have access to as well, and also about a sense of self. in listening to these children, a part of me wished I had that type of self-awareness at 12 and 16 years of age that these kids had, because they could understand the difference between reality, right? You and I sitting here at this table versus what we see on social media.
So those kids you talk to, they seem to get it, that there was a problem here with regards to mental health. But, you know, how much pressure are these kids feeling on a day-to-day basis to be on social media?
A lot. And one of the girls that I was speaking to talked about how for a long time her mom didn't let her get on social media, right? So she would be at the lunch table, for instance, sitting around with a group of friends, and they would be talking about some TikTok that they had watched that day, and she felt like she was out of the conversation. She had FOMO, as she said. And there was a lot of pressure to get on social media. She wasn't chided for it. She wasn't made fun of about it, but she felt pressure to get on there because she wanted to be a part of the conversation. At the end of our talk, I said, what are the good and bad things about social media? And one of the things that came out of it being positive was community, right? And then the bad things, obviously, were the mental health toll that they take in this comparative culture on social media.
So many things for parents to consider. Vasugian. Sorry. There we go. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. And we're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. I'm Gabe Gutierrez. The news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.